Hello everyone, welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. Now we're going to be taking a look at another disturbing case with you in the age of CCTV's DNA testing and constant surveillance. There are very few crimes that can be hidden for long. Today's case is about a monster who was living a horrific double life, a corrupt police force who refused to investigate this case, and a trail of victims who were silenced for years. In the end, all it took to solve this case were a pair of fresh eyes and a discarded pizza box. Keep watching to find out how the Long Island killer was finally caught. Gilgo Beach is on the south side of Long Island, a good hour's drive from the bustling streets of Manhattan. It doesn't look exactly like the type of beach most people have in mind, though. It looks lonely, even abandoned, a place you can bury your secrets in and hide secrets at. Did over a 15-year period, anywhere from 11 to 18 bodies were found there, hidden away in the underbrush. Since 1996, up to 18 sets of human remains have been discovered along this one isolated beach spread out over just 3 miles. Heartbreakingly, most of these cases remain unsolved and many of the victims haven't even been identified. There is a glimmer of hope, though. It looks like at least some of the victims might finally be getting some justice. While the most recent body was found back in 2011, this case really came into the public eye in 2010. That's when people realized the possibility of a Long Island serial killer. Let's go back to where the story all began. Alright, have you been keeping up on this story out of Long Island? It is just it looks like we have a serial killer. Earlier this month, 4 bodies were found, and in December 4 other bodies were found all along Long Island. And now ABC has learned that the sister of one of the victims is getting taunting phone calls from someone that may be the killer. The woman's identity is not being released. She was 15 when her sister was killed. I just don't understand why he chose me, or how many other girls and how many other families. I don't understand why I was chosen, why I was taunted. He used prepaid or throwaway cell phones that he was only on the phone for perhaps up to 3 minutes. It at least tells you he's savvy enough that if it's tracked down, it's not going to point to him. Now I heard that they are thinking that maybe this person who could be involved with law enforcement somehow. Police believe a Long Island serial killer could be responsible for up to 12 deaths, even though they have found only 8 bodies. Attention to these killings started with the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old woman with a complicated past. Shannon, originally from Pennsylvania, had moved to New York with her mother and siblings after her parents split up. Like many young people trying to make ends meet, she worked various odd jobs before eventually turning to sex work. Shannon's life wasn't easy. She'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had struggled with drug abuse. She'd even survived a violent assault that left her needing a titanium plate in her jaw. So for Shannon, sex work became a way to pay the bills, but she had hopes for a better future. She was taking online college courses, dreaming of starting fresh somewhere else. On May 1, 2010, Shannon's life took a turn for the worst. Her driver, a man named Michael Pock, dropped her off at a client's house near Gilgo Beach. The client, Joseph Brewer, had arranged a date with Shannon through Craigslist, but things didn't go as planned. According to reports, Shannon started acting erratically soon after arriving at about 4:51 a.m. Roughly 3 hours after she got there, Shannon made a frantic 911 call. In one of the calls, she said, "They are trying to kill me." In the call, Shannon sounds completely disoriented, like she might be under the influence of something, or maybe having some kind of mental health episode. Whatever was going on, it was clear that things had taken a very bad turn. Shannon made a couple more 911 calls after that. She ran out of Brewer's house and started banging on neighbors' doors before vanishing into the night 2 days. Later on May 3, Shannon's family filed a missing persons report. The police investigated Joseph Brewer and Michael Pack even had them take polygraph tests, but neither was ever named as a suspect in Shannon's disappearance. Both men maintained that nothing bad had happened. They claimed Shannon just started behaving strangely and ran off on her own. Months went by with no sign of Shannon. Then in December 2010 something happened that changed the direction the case was taking. A police officer was out training his canine unit in the area where Shannon had last been seen. Suddenly the dog caught the scent of a human cadaver. They'd found a body, but it wasn't Shannon's. The officer based his choice of search area on FBI data indicating that dumped bodies are frequently found close to roadways despite thick vegetation and a light layer of snow. The cadaver dog alerted to a scent which the pair tracked to a skeleton wrapped in disintegrating burlap. Over the next few days more bodies were discovered. The police began a wide-ranging search for clues. They found 4 bodies in total during that initial search, all badly decomposed. This discovery set off a series of searches that would eventually uncover even more remains, including Shannon's, which was finally found in December 2011. Her case was ruled an accidental drowning, though attorneys for her family maintain the autopsy was inconclusive. With so many bodies found in the same place, investigators realized they were dealing with something much bigger than just Shannon's disappearance. The Long Island serial killer case was official. Some of the victims were identified, but others remain unknown to this day. 22-minute 911 call from Shannon Gilbert. The 23-year-old escort was visiting a client in Oak Beach in May 2010 when she called police for help. What happened? These people are trying to kill me. Gilbert went missing after that 911 call. Her remains were found in a nearby marshland. More than a year later, the police search for Gilbert led to the discovery of 9 other sets of human remains. The group now known as the Gilgo victims. 4 of the victims, now known as the Gilgo Beach 4, are believed to be connected. These 4 were discovered in December 2010 close together, and their bodies were positioned similarly, bound at the wrists or ankles and covered in burlap sacks. These women were Maureen Brainerd Barnes 25, Melissa Bartholomew 24, Megan Waterman 22 and Amber Costello 27. All 4 were sex workers. All had similar looks and they were all petite. These women ranged from 4 feet 10 inches into 5 feet 5 inches 5 in height, and there's another eerie similarity. Each of them had been in contact with someone using a burner phone shortly before they vanished. All 4 were strangled to death, but one of the earliest victims may have been Sandra Costilla. Sandra was a 28-year-old woman from Trinidad and Tobago who was killed in November 1993. Another early killing might be Jessica Taylor. Jessica was 20 years old and she vanished in July 2003 while working as an escort in Midtown Manhattan. Her mother reported her missing when she didn't show up for a planned get-together in Poughkeepsie. A woman walking her dog in the Manville Woods found some of Taylor's remains that same year. Her head, hands and forearm were missing in 2011. 8 years later, Taylor's missing body parts were found along Ocean Parkway just east of Gilgo Beach on the same side of the road and less than a mile from where the Gilgo 4 were found several months earlier. In December 2010, all 5 of the bodies were dumped within 50 feet of the edge of the parkway. The first of the Gilgo 4, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, was from Connecticut and she worked as an escort on Craig's List. She was last seen in July 2007. Then there's Melissa Bartholomew, a New York native who went missing in July 2009. Melissa's case also has some dark details. A week after she disappeared, her younger sister Amanda, just a teenager at the time, started receiving awful phone calls. They were threatening and vulgar calls from someone using a burner phone. This person Would ask if Amanda was __ like her sister, and even claimed to have assaulted and murdered Melissa, saying he was watching her body rot. The third identifiable victim, Megan Waterman, was from Maine and also an escort on Craig's List. Megan vanished in June 2010 while staying at a motel not far from Gilgo Beach. And finally, Amber Costello was from a town just 10 miles from Gilgo Beach. She disappeared in 2010 as well. When you look at all these common factors, the similarities between the victims, where they were dumped, even the way some bodies were dismembered, it points to one person being behind all of this, and with some time and persistence, there's no doubt he would be caught. Sadly, this case could potentially have been solved years earlier if the initial investigation had been more thorough. But in order to understand this case fully, we must touch on how ineffective the police response truly was. For years, crucial information and leads weren't followed by anyone. So what slowed down the case? It's exactly what you'd expect: corruption and a level of incompetence. Plus the fact that the victims were primarily sex workers likely had a role to play in it too. The Suffolk County police chief at the time the bodies were discovered was a man named James Burke. This police chief was arrested back in 2015 and later convicted of beating up a suspect who had stolen some rather personal items from his car: cigars, sex toys and pornography. This wasn't just an isolated incident either. In November 2016, Burke was sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for assault and conspiracy. There was considerable other interagency friction and failures to cooperate in law enforcement that hindered the investigation. Over the years, there was a massive cover-up that ended up with the district attorney in prison and even the county's top anti-corruption prosecutor getting convicted. It's enough to make you wonder if we should just assume anyone involved in anti-corruption efforts is actually the most corrupt of them all. During those crucial first couple of years, the FBI kept offering to help with the investigation, but Burke and the Suffolk County Police kept turning them down. This behavior should have been a massive red flag. What were they trying to hide? It's a frustrating, infuriating situation. Here we have one of the most notorious serial killer cases in recent memory, and for years it was hampered by the very people who were supposed to be solving it. Over the years, there have been several suspects in the Long Island serial killer case. One of them was named John Bitrow. The Suffolk County prosecutor tried pinning it on him, and it even made sense since Bitrow had already been convicted of murdering 2 sex workers and was suspected in a third murder. Plus he lived only 30 m from Gilgo Beach, where the torsos of Gilgo Beach victims were recovered. Bitrow was a hunter who enjoyed killing animals and a carpenter with access to hacksaws and electric saws, which seemed to fit the profile because many of the bodies were found precisely dismembered. His access to proficiency with these tools is of note. Anthony Tangredi could barely speak after hearing the wenching details of his mother's murder when he was a little boy. She was strangled, her skull shattered. Nothing could be harder for a little boy to lose his mom, and you thought they would never catch the killer. You gave up hope a long time ago, but now a day he thought would never come: the trial of her accused killer. John Bitrow, a Manville carpenter, a married father of 2 plucked from an ordinary life when his DNA matched 2 cold murder cases: 30-year-old Rita Tangredi and 20-year-old Colleen McNamee, both prostitutes killed in 1993. For 3 years Bitrow has maintained his innocence from jail, his family behind him. He's an excellent little kid, that's all I have to say. Trusting neighbors were stunned, always helped everybody. It's just unbelievable, nobody could believe it. He's like the mayor of this town, he knows everybody, he helps everybody out. But prosecutors say DNA in this case is witness to the truth. It happens, we don't know everything, the dark side of people's lives, but again, we'll present our evidence and we'll leave it up to the jury. Prosecutors told the jury the case is about science. Both women found naked, uniquely posed in the woods, bodies covered in wood chips. Genetic material left on both victims. The case cracked after Betro's brother was arrested in an unrelated crime. His DNA a partial match with the killer. Investigators would search the garbage of this Manorville house to find a match. In John Betro, the defense blasted police for losing evidence, pointing out DNA doesn't prove murder and others had motives. The adult daughter of Rita Tangretti, who was murdered by Betro, was also the best friend of Melissa, one of the Gilgo Beach victims. Melissa's mother said that her daughter had a lot of calls to Manville from her phone before her death, but as we now know, that wasn't the case. Even James Burke, the corrupt police chief mentioned earlier, was on the list of suspects at one point. Apparently he had a history of violence with sex workers. Peter Hackett was another suspect. He was a neighbor of Joseph Brewer, who, as you already know, was Shannon Gilbert's client the night she disappeared. Hackett was a former doctor specializing in biology, which could also make him a suspect after Shannon disappeared. Her mother, who has since passed away, claimed that Hackett called her multiple times saying he had Shannon and was taking good care of her. When confronted, Hackett denied ever calling Shannon's mother, but phone records told a different story. Oh, and some of Shannon's belongings were found just outside his home. Now experts put together a psychological profile of the Gilgo Beach killer. They described him as likely a white male in his mid-20s to mid-40s, educated with an expensive vehicle, married and employed. Not your stereotypical dysfunctional killer, but someone who seems well adjusted, at least on the surface. For a long time the case went cold, but with a new administration and a new chief of police, things finally began to heat up. They decided to focus on those disturbing phone calls like the ones Melissa's younger sister Amanda received. The new team invested in technology and reconnected with the FBI for assistance. They started tracing all these burner phones, tracking where calls to the victims had been made. Slowly but surely they narrowed it down to two specific areas the calls were made during the day, from Midtown Manhattan, specifically around Madison Square Garden in Penn Station. At night, calls came from Macy Piquet Park, a residential area in southern Long Island, about a half-hour drive from Gilgo Beach. Interestingly, Macy Piquet Park is right next to Amityville. Yeah, that Amityville already associated with horror. These calls weren't just to the victims but to their relatives too. The timing of the calls suggested a clear pattern. The killer worked in Midtown Manhattan and lived in Macy Piquet. You'd think knowing the killer worked in Midtown Manhattan and lived in Macy Piquet would make things easier, but we're talking about New York here. It's not exactly a small town. The new investigative team started digging through old evidence and finally had a major breakthrough. Let's go back to September 1, 2010, the day before Amber disappeared. A call was made from a burner phone around Macy Piquet Park. That same day a client showed up at Amber's place in West Babylon, New York. Now Amber and her friend had a little trick up their sleeve. The client would come in, pay Amber up front, and just as things were about to get going, Amber's friend would burst in pretending to be her boyfriend. The client would then be scared off and they'd keep the money. It's a classic scam, but this time there was a problem. The client later contacted Amber on that burner phone asking for a rain check. The next day Amber vanished. Now someone described this client as an ogre. He was a big white guy around 250 pounds, 6 feet 4 inches in 66, with huge 70s glasses and dark bushy hair. Most importantly, he drove a Chevrolet Avalanche, and this detail about the Avalanche had been sitting in those files for over a decade. So the police started looking for Chevrolet Avalanches and the names linked to them. One name that popped up was Rex Hoyman. He was 59, which put him in his 40s when the crimes occurred. Interestingly, his name had never come up before March 2022. They dug deeper. Hoyman was a wealthy architect who founded Hyman Consultants and Associates Incorporated in Midtown Manhattan back in 1994. He had worked with big names like Nike, American Airlines, Target, and so on, and he lived In Macy Pickway Park just across the bay from Gilgo Beach, Rex Hoyman had a wife and 2 grown children, a daughter in her 20s and a stepson in his early 30s. He ticked pretty much every box on the original profile of the serial killer. When they looked into his online activity, things got dark. He had fake email addresses, Tinder accounts, and some seriously disturbing internet searches. You can use your imagination. It was the worst stuff you can think of. That's what he was looking up. Fortunately, here's where modern technology really shines. Back when the investigation first started, they'd found hairs on some of the bodies, burlap sacks and duct tape used to bind the victims, but in 2010 they couldn't get much information from them. But now technology has made it possible. The investigators went through Herman's trash, including pizza boxes he'd thrown out at work. DNA testing showed a definite match between Herman's DNA and one of his victims. A potential match to Hyman's wife was also found when comparing hair found on or near 3 of the victims to samples taken from bottles found in the trash outside the Hyman residence. Investigators have stated that Hyman's wife and children were out of state each time the killings are believed to have occurred. Finally, on July 13, 2023, Herman was arrested as he left his office that evening after 13 long years. Investigators are confident they've got their guy. It seems that Herman probably knew the authorities were closing in on him. In the 16 months leading up to his arrest in July 2023, he conducted over 200 internet searches about the Gilgo Beach killer and the Long Island serial killer. Hoyman had apparently even resumed visiting escorts, and most worryingly had been trying to track down one of his alleged victims' children. But this is where Herman slipped up. He was uploading selfies from his burner phone. If you're trying to stay anonymous, that's not exactly a smart move. These selfies were intended for sex workers. He was also caught on CCTV in stores buying more minutes for his burner phone. He'd used the name Andy Roberts for this phone, as well as for Tinder accounts and email addresses. The investigators were able to track down where the phones were used, both the burner phones and his personal phone. These 2 phones would travel together, which is how they were able to definitively make a connection between them. In December 2010, the remains of 10 people were found near Ocean Parkway in Suffolk County, New York. Nearly 13 years later, on Thursday night, 59-year-old Rex Hoyman was arrested in Manhattan and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder. That includes the death of Buffalo native Melissa Bartholomew. She went missing in July 2009. At the time, she was working as an escort, a trend the district attorney says is consistent in the case. They all did the same thing for a living. They all advertised the same way, and there were similarities with regard to the crime scenes. According to police, the women, including Bartholomew, were tied up and covered with camouflage burlap sacks. Male hair was found in one of the burlap sacks. According to the bail application, in the case for each of the murders, he got an individual burner phone and he used that to communicate with the victims. Then shortly after the death of the victims, he then would get rid of the burner phone. In March of last year, 6 weeks after a task force was formed on the case, law enforcement identified Hoyman as a suspect. We had him under surveillance. We had other means of monitoring him and continued to keep an eye on what he was doing. Over the course of the next year, we were able to use fictitious or fraudulent email addresses and get Google warrants, and from there we got his searches. Those warrants turned up evidence that Hoyman allegedly searched for information about the Gilgo Beach murders over 200 times. Hoyman had little to say in court Friday afternoon. "We're going to hold him responsible for what he did in this case," Lynn Bartholomew spoke to Claudine Ewing in 2011, shortly after Melissa's remains were found after Hoyman's arrest. Lynn simply told "2 on your side, I'm just relieved." According to court documents, investigators were able to link Hoyman to the crime scene discovered in 2010 from a pizza box he threw out in January of this year. Lab technicians were able to match his DNA from pizza crust to the hair found in the burlap sack. Hyman has pleaded not guilty to all charges. He's been charged with first and second degree murder. As for his earliest victim, Sandra, Hyman was 29 and 3 years away from getting his architecture license when her remains were found. DNA from hairs found on her body matched Hyman, so he's recently been charged with her killing as well. Hyman was also charged with second-degree murder in the killing of 20-year-old Jessica Taylor. He's suspected of killing a seventh woman, Valerie Mack, but no charges have been filed in that case, Suffolk District Attorney Raymond Tierney said during a press conference. His intent was to locate these victims, hunt them down, bring them under his control and kill them. His attorney has pointed out that the case is largely circumstantial at this point. Hyman reportedly told his lawyer in tears, "I didn't do this. The only thing I can tell you that he did say as he was in tears was, I didn't do this." The attorney emphasized that everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty in our country, and they're looking forward to fighting this case in a court of law, not in the court of public opinion. You'd think a wealthy architect working in Midtown Manhattan would be living large, but in Herman's case you'd be wrong. Herman's house, despite his profession as an architect, was described as the neighborhood eyesore. It is actually his childhood home, which he purchased from his mother in 1994. In an interview on YouTube, Herman stated he has worked in Manhattan since 1987. He spoke about renovating it but let it fall into further disrepair. According to the arrest affidavit, when Herman allegedly killed the 3 victims he's been charged with, his wife was conveniently out of town. This led police to believe that after contacting the victims on Craigslist via burner phones, he likely brought them back to his house, killed them there, and then dumped their bodies at nearby Gilgo Beach. Neighbors considered Hyman creepy. One even said, "I wasn't surprised at all when asked about the allegations, citing his general creepiness." Another neighbor would complain that Hyman would frequently peer over their yard and try to talk to his wife while he was away at work. His was the house parents warned their kids to avoid on Halloween. The police search of Hyman's home turned up some truly bizarre items. There were about 300 guns. He only had licenses for less than half. A creepy child's doll encased in glass and a portrait of a disfigured woman. There's also his unnerving wig. Unsurprisingly, his wife has since filed for divorce. Interestingly, accounts of Hyman from his co-workers are mixed. Some described him as nice and sociable, while others found him creepy and unsettling. Hyman's 2 adult children had said through an attorney that they stand by their father. He had this habit of bringing up the Gilgo murders out of the blue, which in hindsight seems pretty suspicious. Herman was also very litigious. Over the past decade he filed at least 4 personal injury lawsuits against drivers, seeking a total of about $20 million. The defendants claimed he exaggerated or even staged his injuries. On top of that, he's years behind on hundreds of thousands in taxes. He was once kicked out of a Whole Foods for stealing fruit. There were clementines left out for kids to snack on. After a 12-day search of Hyman's home, investigators found a soundproof vault in his basement, but thankfully no bodies or bones, at least not yet. But that's also where they found a hard drive. They had to make the data on it accessible after Hyman allegedly tried to delete it, and once they did, they discovered a document to plan out kills, the all-caps document, which prosecutors described as Hyman's blueprint for murder, was allegedly written between 2000 and 2002. It reads like a grocery list with disturbing tasks to complete before, during, and after killings, written in capital letters. The manual is structured as a series of reminder lists under topics like prep, which offers banal tips about the importance of checking weather reports and looking for surveillance cameras. The prep section is more grim, with directives to set up a holding area and stage with equipment for apparent sexual torture. The body prep list includes reminders on how to avoid leaving evidence. One note reads, more sleep and noise control equals more Playtime. Under the heading Things to Remember, it reads: get sleep before hunt and consider a hit to the face or neck. Next time. A body prep checklist includes a note to remove ID marks like tattoos and remove head and hands. Another section lists potential problems, citing things like DNA, tire marks, fingerprints, possible witnesses and hair. The manual's instructions on packaging bodies for transport corresponded to the condition of the Gilgo for when they were found near Ocean Parkway. The instructions also match the handling of the bodies of the two women that Hoyer man was charged with killing. The manual, assembled with an architect's precision, suggests that Hoyer man engaged in sadistic sexual acts with his victims before and after death. Hoyer man maintained a double life, waiting for his wife and their children to leave on vacation and then possibly detaining, torturing and killing his victims in the basement of the family home in Macy-Pickaway Park, a middle-class neighborhood dense with well-kept houses. The manual includes a reminder to destroy computer files, and Hoyerman had taken steps to delete it, but forensics experts were able to recover it. Mr. Hoyman's personality, according to a criminologist and expert on serial killers, it's totally consistent with his personality type. He's a highly meticulous, organized, intelligent individual who didn't leave one detail unattended to, according to a retired NYPD sergeant. Before all this is over, he could become one of the most prolific serial killers ever on Long Island. Story 2. They say that every child deserves a parent, but not every parent deserves a child. This statement couldn't be truer in today's case. Instead of seeing his children as tiny humans who needed his protection, Mick Philpott saw them as his personal cash cows that brought him benefits from the government. His greed blinded him from their humanity in the worst way possible. He was fame-hungry, narcissistic, and diagnosed as a psychopath who made everyone's life around him a living hell. In this video, we'll look at how Philpott and his accomplices took the lives of 6 young children and what drove them to do this heinous act. Let's get started. Mick Philpott was born in 1956 in Derby, England. He was notorious for fathering 17 children with multiple women, and if you thought he had so many children because he loves them, you would sadly be mistaken. You see, he had practically no nurturing qualities. In fact, he was an extremely violent and unpredictable man. His toxic pattern of behavior with women and children started with his first relationship when he was 19. He charmed a 15-year-old named Kim Hill, and they began dating shortly after. In the beginning, Kim saw Philpott as an ideal partner, but it didn't take long before he suddenly became abusive in every way you can think of. His violence was so uncontrollable that he even started beating her in public. In one incident at a pub, Philpott struck Kim across the mouth with a pool cue. Needless to say, she started bleeding severely, but no one dared to intervene or try to help her. He would use any excuse he could find to harm her. For example, once Philpott broke her arm and fractured her kneecap with a hammer when she paid too much attention to a baby she had been minding. As a British Army member, he would baselessly accuse her of infidelity when he returned from postings and physically assault her. He also shot Kim in the groin with a crossbow one time because he felt her dress had been too short. Kim, still in school, often lied about the cause of her injuries to protect Philpott. After 2 years of abuse, in July 1978, Kim plucked up the courage to send Philpott a breakup letter. In response, Philpott went AWOL from the army and broke into Kim's home. He attacked her in bed, stabbing her 27 times with a 9-in knife. According to Kim, he told her menacingly, "If I can't have you, no one else will." When Kim's mother intervened, Philpott stabbed her 11 times. Both Kim and her mother barely survived the attack despite being badly injured. Her mother, who was a nurse, crawled to a phone and raised the alarm. Paramedics arrived to find Philpott on the stairs, still holding the bloody knife. He told them, "I wouldn't bother, she's a goner, I'd done a good job on her." Kim actually died twice in the ambulance and on the operating table as surgeons battled to save her life. Philpott had slit her stomach open and stabbed her on the back, arms and legs. She suffered collapsed lungs and a punctured bladder, kidney and liver. During the trial he lied and implied he stabbed her in self-defense, but all the evidence showed otherwise. Philpott was found guilty of attempted murder and grievous bodily harm. He was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison but was released after serving just 3 years and 2 months according to records. This early release was due to his good behavior. Needless to say, he received nothing more than a slap on the wrist and had absolutely no incentive to change his twisted ways, as we'll soon see. While in prison he sent Kim letters expressing remorse and even proposing to marry her upon his release. This horrific attack left Kim traumatized, and she is still receiving counseling 4 decades later. Recalling her hellish life with Philpott, Kim added, "Do not say no to MC Philpott. You don't say no to him. He doesn't understand the word." After his release from prison in 1986, Philpott married Pamela Lomax. They had 3 children together and he continued his abusive behavior. Pamela was too afraid to report him, knowing what had happened to his previous partner Kim. She prayed that he would move on to someone else, which is what he did. In 1993, Philpott, then 37, began a relationship with a 14-year-old girl named Heather Kio. Pamela left him after discovering the affair. The teenage Heather ran away from her parents to be with him on her 16th birthday, and they had 2 sons. Philpott was abusive towards her, even beating her for not having a girl. He even taught his older sons to be violent against Heather. Philpott wanted Heather to produce more children, but she did not conceive again. She was often punished by being locked outside the house in the garden and told police. Philpott once held a knife to her throat when she tried to leave him. Eventually she climbed over the fence and escaped him. Heather was forced to temporarily abandon her children before regaining custody. After a long court battle, she said that Philpott was a Jekyll and Hyde character, charming when they first met but later violent. In 2000, Philpott met 19-year-old Mary Duffy. She was a single teenage mother who had recently left an abusive relationship. Philpott, she said, became her guardian angel. They moved in together shortly after he took on responsibility for her son and proposed to her in hospital. After the birth of their first child, Jade, the following year, he also began a relationship with Lisa Willis, a 16-year-old orphan who also happened to be a single mother. She became his mistress and moved in with him and married. Perhaps because of Philpott's domineering presence, Lisa and Maird became very close. They regularly confided in each other, and Lisa said she had treated Murad's children as her own. There is clearly a pattern here. All 3 women in Philpott's life had been teenagers when they met him. They had effectively been groomed while they were vulnerable. Philpott married Murad in May 2003 with Lisa as the bridesmaid. From that year onwards, Philpott lived with both women and had 11 children in a 3-bedroom council house. Both women worked while he remained unemployed, collecting their earnings and government benefits. Philpott actively tried to have more children to stack up his benefit payments. He requested a larger council house to accommodate his growing family but was denied due to lack of availability. Mara married Mick in 2003. Will you take my Miss Caroline to be your wife? Will you love her, comfort her, honor her? He was 7 months pregnant with Mick's child on his wedding day. Will you love her? Philpott publicly defended his lifestyle, expressing pride in his large family and dismissing critics. He blamed the council for not providing adequate housing and argued that as an unemployed person he deserved more assistance from the government. Philpott tried to bring media attention to his housing situation. He appeared on the Jeremy Kyle Show in 2007, a program similar to the Jerry Springer Show. On the show, Philpott defended his lifestyle and unemployment, claiming he couldn't get a job due to media coverage and his criminal record. He became agitated when questioned about his parenting and job prospects, which led to an argument with the host Jeremy over his irresponsible lifestyle on the show. Insisted he had undergone a vasectomy. He defended himself in typically heated fashion, making an offensive gesture and telling the host, "Talk to that pal, talk to that." Philpott introduced his wife, Merritt, and his second wife Lisa Willis on the show, openly acknowledging his unconventional living arrangement. He claimed he didn't care what the public opinion was about his lifestyle and large family. Philpott also said he was prepared to divorce his wife to marry Lisa and then divorce her simply so that she would not feel left out because she did not share the Philpott family name. He went on to have 2 more kids after it and was dubbed Britain's biggest scanger after it was revealed he was raking in £25,000 a year in benefits. So Philpott's plan to gain public support for a larger house was unsuccessful. Today I want to discover the man behind the headlines and uncover the truth about the guy who has been branded Britain's biggest scanger. You're going to criticize my family, pal, and my kids. I'll criticize you as much as I want. This is a free country. In 2007, Philpott appeared in an episode of a documentary series in which the then Conservative MP in Wee Tom spent a week with him and tried to persuade him to change his lifestyle. She found Philpott 3 jobs, one of which was with a barrel-making firm, but he did not turn up for work on the first day and the job fell through. In the documentary, Philpott was shown to be living in a caravan in his garden in which his wife and mistress would alternate in spending nights with him. The MP said that Philpott did not care about anyone and that he used the word __ to refer to both his wife and his mistress. She also noticed that none of his children sought affection from him, although many people could not understand why the women in his life accepted their lot or even desired it. The general opinion was that his partners got on well with one another, but behind closed doors the tensions between the throuple had reached a boiling point. And I've got my kids and I've got my family, that's all I care about, nothing else. You don't think so? Then you don't think so? Then can I just get the distribution of children right? I've got 3 with my first marriage, 2 with another young lady, 5 with Mairead, 4 with Lisa, and 1 with another young lady, and 2 on the way. So that's 15 now, and 2 on the way plus 1 when I was in the armed services, which I've never met. He asked Mairead to divorce him 3 times so he could marry Lisa. In 2010, Philpott was given a police caution for slapping Mairead and dragging her outside by her hair, but he wasn't nice to Lisa either. Philpott hit her with a piece of wood, threw a hot cup of coffee at her, and prevented her from leaving the house or speaking with any men. In February 2012, Lisa had finally had enough of the toxic situation she was in. She decided to leave Philpott. She told Mairead she was taking her 5 children swimming, but instead moved in with her sister. This was the only way she could leave without any confrontation. 3 months after Lisa left, Philpott was still seething with anger and entangled in a rough custody battle over their 5 children. So he, along with his wife Mairead and a family friend named Paul Mosley, did the vilest thing you can think of. They planned to burn down their home with their own children inside and frame Lisa for it. The arson was scheduled for the day before a custody hearing between Lisa and Philpott. He wanted his children back, motivated by his greed for more benefit payments and the potential to get an even bigger council house. The plan involved Philpott and Mosley putting gasoline into the mail slot and setting fire to the house. Then Philpott would swoop in and rescue his 6 children from the fire, making himself look like a heroic father and win the custody battle. To say that this idea was misguided would be an understatement. On May 11, 2012 at 4:00 a.m. Philpott's plan to set fire to his house went tragically wrong. The fire spread much faster than anyone expected. It resulted in the deaths of 6 children. Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, and Jaden died at the scene, while their half-brother Dwayne died in the hospital 2 days later. All deaths were caused by excessive smoke inhalation. Fire investigators reported that temperatures in the upstairs bedrooms exceeded 500 degrees Celsius, leaving no chance of survival for anyone in those rooms. Police confirmed that the fire was deliberately started with Petrol under the letter box classifying it as arson and officially stating that 6 children had been murdered. We've got the police on the way. Do you have any idea what caused the fire? I don't know. All of these children belong to Mairead and Philpot except Dwayne, who was her teenage son from a previous relationship. Jade was only 10 years old. She was described as very intelligent and well regarded at school. 9-year-old John was cheerful, smiley and polite. Jaden, a 5-year-old, loved lots of cuddles from family and friends. Shy and bashful Jack, 7, was the quietest sibling and a delight to be around. Jesse, 6 years old, was described as a loud character in the family. Dwayne, the eldest victim at just 13, was described as a charming and caring young boy who was a protector for his younger brothers and sister. Nobody in the community had the slightest clue that a father could do such a thing. Many people who knew and socialized with Philpot and his family defended his lifestyle, saying negative representations of the area and the man did not live up to the reality. One local, Bobby Sutherland, was inspired to set up a charity to help pay for the funerals of the 6 children whom he claimed Philpot loved, desperately fighting back tears as he stood in the street outside the fire-ravaged family home. He said at the time, "Yeah, they can slag him off, but he loved his kids. Yeah, you make mistakes, but you don't deserve that. Nobody deserves that." This shows just how good Philpot was at manipulating the people around him and maintaining his image as a good husband and father. At first, Lisa Willis and her brother-in-law were questioned, but they were quickly cleared of any suspicion. Meanwhile, witnesses reported that Philpot behaved strangely for someone who had recently lost several of his children and appeared to like the media attention. A mortuary manager said Philpot engaged in horseplay when he went to view his children's bodies, even putting a family liaison officer in a headlock during one visit. As part of their investigation, the police organized a press conference where Philpot and Mairead spoke. During this conference, Philpot thanked various people for their support and announced their decision to donate Dwayne's organs to save the life of another child. He expressed gratitude for the community's response and requested privacy for his family, asking that all questions be directed to the police. This press conference actually increased police suspicions. Philpot's behavior was notably inappropriate, including flirting with a female police officer. She claimed that he called her gorgeous and inferred he would like her to come back to his hotel. "We grew up in a community that's had a lot of problems with violence and God knows what else, and to see this community to come together like that, it's just too overwhelming." The police found forensic evidence linking the Philpots to the crime. A discarded petrol container and glove had been found near the house, and in November, forensic investigators discovered that the clothes of the Philpots and Mosley had petrol on them. For further information, they placed a recording device in the police vehicle in their hotel room. The recorded conversations revealed incriminating statements from Philpot, including him saying it was his fault they lost their children and family. He can be heard saying, "You definitely sticking with the story. I didn't mean to do it on my life." Plus, the recording captured Philpot watching Mairead perform a sexual act on Paul Mosley. Their accomplice Philpot was heard telling his wife, "I'm proud of you because you didn't want to do it. Tell me what you said to him then. What did you say about how many times you went up the ladders?" "I can't remember how many times I went up the ladders." "What did you say about me trying to get in?" "You tried everything you could to get in. I said to him I wanted to run through the flames up the stairs." "What did you cry when you were saying it? How bad?" "Not really, really bad. But I did cry. That's a circle. It's my fault that I think family's gone. It's my fault we lost our children. It's my fault we lost the other 5 children. It's my fault we lost Lisa. I should have seen it all coming though. It's your fault we lost Lisa. It is my fault. There's a fingerprint on the window. That's it. A few discrepancies. That's all it is. Mommy's shaky about it. I said we were going to go out for a drive at night. I can't remember saying that. Vicky said you were stoned. That's it. We didn't smoke." In police interviews, Mosley said He had sex with Murat over a snooker table hours before the fire broke out. It's believed this act was encouraged by Philpott to keep Mosley loyal to their cause. Philpott even admitted having 3 or 4 sexual encounters with his wife and co-defendant Paul Mosley not long after his children's deaths. These recordings, along with other evidence, such as an amused ladder found at the back of the house intended for the planned rescue, also implicated Philpott, Murat and Paul Mosley in the arson plot. On May 28, 2012, Philpott and Murat were arrested on suspicion of murder. They were formally charged with murder 2 days later. On November 5, 2012, Paul Mosley was also arrested on suspicion of murder after forensic examination revealed petrol on his clothing. The trial heard that Mosley had been bragging to a number of people about being a suspect, including on internet dating sites. Whatever Mosley's role, it seems that Philpott was keen to keep him on side, and police believe coercion may have been involved. In December, Mosley's charge was reduced to manslaughter. The murder charges against Philpott and Murat were also eventually downgraded to manslaughter. Evidence showed that, while they didn't intend to kill their children, they planned to frame Lisa for endangering the family in order to gain custody of her children. Their motivation was not solely revenge. More children meant more benefit money and potentially a larger house. On April 2, 2013, the couple, along with Paul Mosley, were found guilty of manslaughter for the deaths of the 6 children. Philpott received a life sentence with a minimum of 15 years in prison. Murat and Paul Mosley each received 17-year sentences with a minimum of 8.5 years to be served. Murat later appealed against her sentence, but judges ruled the original term reflected the immeasurable harm she had caused. Court of Appeal judges said petrol found on her clothes showed she had participated in setting the fire, which had not been a spur-of-the-moment plan. She had also lied after her arrest, the judges said, and continued to hide the truth during her trial. In her sentencing remarks, Mrs. Justice Thwal said it was clear the fire was Philpott's idea, but she said Murat's children died because she put her husband first. We therefore have come to the view that this sentence cannot be criticized. The judge was careful in reaching the conclusion she did. She gave very cogent and clear reasons for it. She assessed against her primary findings of fact the blameworthiness of Murat Philpott and arrived at a sentence that reflected that very severe degree of blameworthiness, together with the immeasurable harm she had caused by the killing of her 6 children, for whom, like any other mother, she had had an absolute responsibility. We have, after an examination of the circumstances and a careful consideration of the judge's view, come to the conclusion without any hesitation that this appeal must be dismissed. In November 2020, Murat was released after serving half her term. She was eligible to be released on license and taken by convoy to a halfway house. According to a source for The Sun, her convoy was like one given to a celebrity rather than a mom who killed her 6 children. Murat was also given a new identity for her protection. The Center for Crime Prevention described the release as appalling and called for killers to serve their full sentences for such crimes. Paul Mosley too was released from prison in May 2021 after serving half his sentence, but returned to prison in 2022 after breaching terms of parole. In November 2023 he was released again, the parole panel stated. The panel was satisfied that imprisonment was no longer necessary for the protection of the public, so while Murat and Mosley are free, Philpott is still in prison completing his minimum sentence of 15 years. Philpott was characterized as a monster, abusive to women and exploitative of the welfare system, who viewed children primarily as a source of income. Psychologist Glenn Wilson described Philpott as clinically a psychopath and exhibitionist with antisocial personality disorder. What did you think of this horrific case and everyone involved? Do you think their sentences were too light? Philpott definitely got away too lightly for his attempted murder charge in the 70s Story 3 When a surprise confession on a talk show turned into a bone-chilling murder, the resulting courtroom drama revealed unsettling truths about media ethics and personal vendettas. What really happened after the cameras stopped rolling? Scott Bernard Amador was born on January 26, 1963 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His father Frank worked as a truck driver and his mother Patricia was a housewife. After Scott was born, the family moved to Michigan, and soon after Scott's parents divorced, Scott dropped out of high school to join the military and served 3 years. Before being discharged as a specialist upon returning to Michigan, Scott worked in telecommunications before finding his job as a bartender, though he was known for being a social butterfly and making friends easily. He eventually left bartending and became unemployed. Scott was openly gay and proud, a fact that his family accepted and supported from the start. He was also known for his kindness and support, as he often helped friends with HIV and offered them a place to stay when others would not. Scott was also a big fan of talk shows, especially The Jenny Jones Show. The Jenny Jones Show was a daytime talk show that aired for 12 years from 1991 to 2003. At first, the show struggled with low ratings, which led it to shift its focus to more dramatic content. For example, the show would surprise guests with shocking confrontations, such as bringing in a woman who had an affair with a married man to face his wife, or revealing paternity test results live on air. Other episodes included dramatic breakups and confrontations between spouses about affairs. And one day, as Scott was watching the show, Jenny Jones introduced a new special segment called Secret Crushes and encouraged people with same-sex crushes to apply. Thinking nothing much would come of it, Scott decided to apply. He had a crush on a new friend, 24-year-old Jonathan Schmidge, whom he had met earlier that year. Now, when Scott applied to be on the Jenny Jones Show, he didn't really expect to hear back, but soon after he received a phone call inviting him to Chicago to appear on the show. Excited about the chance to finally confess his feelings to Jonathan, Scott reached out to their mutual friend Donna Riley and asked her to join him. Jonathan knew Donna through Scott, so it made sense for Scott to ask her to join him on the show. Scott, Jonathan, and Donna all lived near each other in the Lake Orion area, with Donna actually living in the same apartment complex as Jonathan. Scott had met Jonathan when he visited his brother, who also lived in the same complex. He had seen Donna and Jonathan outside in the parking lot fixing Donna's car, though Jonathan was more of Donna's friend and only an acquaintance of Scott. Scott still wanted to confess his feelings to him. Scott called Donna before the shoot and told her they were going to be in a lot of trouble. When Donna asked why, Scott revealed he planned to surprise Jonathan by confessing his crush on him. At the same time, producers of the Jenny Jones Show called Jonathan to let him know that someone had a crush on him and wanted to reveal it on national TV. The producers of the Jenny Jones Show Jonathan that his secret admirer could be either a man or a woman, but insisted that he would only find out who it was if he agreed to be on the show. When Jonathan pressed for details and said he wasn't interested if the admirer was a man, the producers reassured him, saying they couldn't reveal who it was, but that everything would be fine and he'd have a good time. Despite their reassurances, Jonathan's production notes clearly show he was uncomfortable with the idea of a secret admirer being a man and was not keen on participating in anything strange, but he was also curious about who it could be and agreed to appear on the show mainly because he suspected it might be his ex-girlfriend whom he had recently broken up with. He also had some suspicions that Donna or Scott might be involved in the reveal, so he called Donna and Scott to ask if either of them was his secret admirer, but both denied being involved. They wanted to keep the surprise for the show, but this small white lie would later have very serious consequences. On March 6, 1995, Scott, Donna, and Jonathan were in Chicago for the shooting of the Jenny Jones Show. Donna and Scott were the first to come out on stage while Jonathan waited Backstage, unaware of what was awaiting him when Jenny Jones asked Scott how he had met Jonathan, Scott said that it was during a time when Jonathan was fixing Donna's car. He mentioned that he had only seen Jonathan's lower half while he was working under the car, focusing on the brake line. Jenny then asked Scott what his first impression was, to which Scott replied, "Well, I only saw the lower half." Now Donna has been helping Scott pursue his secret crush on John Johns. Backstage, he can't hear us. How bad is the crush? Tell me about the first time you met him. Where was he? Basically, well, he was under a car working on her brake line, and that was your first time. What was your first impression? Well, I only saw the lower half. I'm sure you can imagine. Jenny also asked if Scott knew if Jonathan was gay. Scott responded, "No. Anything is possible." Jenny then asked if Jonathan knew Scott was gay, to which Scott replied again, "No, anything is possible." It is highly likely that Scott thought the show would be a meaningful and dramatic way to confess his feelings for Jonathan, not thinking of the potential discomfort Jonathan might feel. Scott also revealed a personal fantasy during the show. He admitted to everyone in the room that he had imagined tying Jonathan up in a hammock he had in his backyard with champagne and whipped cream throughout the shoot. However, Jonathan was visibly nervous. Jenny Jones pressured him to make the moment look good for the audience and even suggested he give Jonathan flowers or kiss him, but Scott refused to do either. When the time finally came for Jonathan to find out who his secret admirer was, he walked out on stage and saw Donna and Scott sitting there. Jonathan greeted Donna with a kiss on the cheek and then shook hands with Scott, who pulled him into a tight hug. When Jenny Jones revealed to Jonathan that it was Scott who had the crush on him, Jonathan was shocked. He had thought the admirer might be Donna, as they were good friends. Despite the awkward situation, Jonathan tried to be polite and pointed out again that the gesture was indeed flattering, but he was definitely heterosexual. Jonathan then recalled how he first met Scott. He mentioned that one night when Donna was fixing her car's brakes, Scott had pulled up and made a comment about the peace sign Jonathan had drawn on his car. Joking about it, Scott had also complimented Jonathan's looks to Donna. Jonathan admitted that while he appreciated the compliment, he wasn't interested in pursuing anything with Scott. The episode was indeed awkward, but it ended without hassle. But the episode would never be aired, as Scott would tragically die before it had the chance to be broadcast. Okay, you think about you. You have fantasies about him. I've had a couple. Yeah, you have one. You had one even under the car. You had a fantasy about him. Yes, something to do with like brake oil line snapping, and I got a pretty big hammock in my yard and I just, I thought about tying him up to my hammock, and it entails like whipped cream and champagne, stuff like that. Now, John, he knows you're gay, right? Yeah, do you know that he is? No, anything's possible. What's so exciting about him to you? He's got a cute little hard body, you know, one you just want to pick up and put in your Carol cabinet, you know, dust him off once in a while. Do you want to physically pick him up? Oh, he's just a tiny little cute thing. He's gorgeous. Well, alright, let's see if he really is. Get the headphones off of John and let's have John come out here and see who has the crush on him. Here's John. Did you think Donna had the crush on you? Did I? No, we're good friends. Well, guess what? It's Scott that has the crush on you. You lied to me before we talked. Take a look, and we'll show a playback of what Scott said about you. John, take a look at that. It entails like whipped cream and champagne, stuff like that. Scott was pretty open about he's been fantasizing about you since he saw you under that car for the first time. He had an under the car fantasy and he had a hammock fantasy he's been telling us about. Did you have any idea that he liked you this much? No. Can you tell us what your status is? Are you involved with anybody or no? But I am definitely a heterosexual. After the episode, Scott, Jonathan and Donna enjoyed their time together in Chicago. Everything seemed to be fine and they all publicly agreed to stay friends. They went out to a party and Jonathan, not wanting the night to end, suggested that Donna and Scott change their flight to match his so he could drive them home from the airport. Both Donna and Scott agreed, and after their plane landed back In Michigan, Jonathan drove them back to Scott's home. They briefly stayed at Scott's trailer before heading out for a drink at a nearby bar called Brusky's. After they finished partying, the three friends returned to their daily lives. From the outside it seemed like they had all stayed true to their word and there was no visible tension from their time on the show, but just a couple of days later everything changed. 3 days after the shoot on March 9, 1995, Jonathan came home from work to find a flashing orange construction barrier light and a handwritten note outside his door. The note clearly from Scott read, "If you really want to get it off, I'm the only one who has the right tool." This message, along with the annoying sight of the construction light, left Jonathan extremely upset, feeling enraged and threatened by the note. Jonathan decided he wanted to confront Scott. He went to a nearby bank to withdraw some money and then visited a couple of hardware stores where he bought a shotgun. Jonathan then assembled the shotgun and, with the gun loaded and by his side, drove to the trailer park where Scott lived. Upon arriving at Scott's trailer, Jonathan approached the front door empty-handed. Scott greeted him warmly and invited him inside. Once inside, Jonathan saw that Scott was not alone. Scott's friend Gary was also there, reading a newspaper on the couch. There is some conflicting information about what happened next, but some sources claim that Scott admitted to Jonathan that the note was indeed from him. In any case, Jonathan told Scott and Gary at one point that he needed to go back outside to turn off his car. He then went outside and shut the front door behind him. A few minutes later, Scott heard knocking, and when he opened the door he saw Jonathan standing there with a loaded gun. Scott immediately yelled for help and told Gary that Jonathan had a gun. According to Gary, Scott grabbed a nearby chair to use as a shield in a desperate attempt to defend himself, but unfortunately it was not enough. Jonathan shot twice in the chest and the bullets instantly ended his life. Jonathan then left the trailer and went to a nearby gas station where he used a payphone to call 911. When the operator answered, Jonathan calmly said, "I think I just shot a man." Overwhelmed with emotion, he began to cry as he admitted what he had done. "I think I just shot a man." "Okay, calm down. Okay, why did you do that?" Jonathan was arrested and charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony firearm. On October 14, 1996, Jonathan Schmidge appeared in court for his trial. The prosecution wanted to prove that Jonathan had committed first-degree premeditated murder and claimed that he had a lot of time to reflect on his actions. They said that Jonathan had gone to the bank, bought and loaded the gun, and then drove to Scott's house, and he even stepped outside to grab the weapon. They argued that no matter what the Jenny Jones show did, the act of killing someone over words or embarrassment was indefensible and could not be excused by the circumstances. The defense strategy, on the other hand, was to shift the blame away from Jonathan and onto other factors. They claimed that Jonathan was not in a proper state of mind that night and lacked the ability to think clearly or plan his actions. They acknowledged the evidence against him, including his confession to 911 and the witness testimony, but argued that these did not necessarily reflect his mental state at the time of the crime. They used Jonathan's mental health and medical conditions to argue that these factors contributed to his loss of control. They claimed that Jonathan was deeply humiliated and horrified by what happened on the show, which then pushed him into a state of uncontrollable rage and agitation. They argued that this emotional turmoil triggered one of his cycles of depression and violence. Jonathan was suffering from what is known as a major affective disorder, specifically depression, which can greatly impact a person's ability to control their actions. They claimed that conditions like Jonathan's can lead to a loss of control and contribute to extreme reactions. Jonathan also had a history of other mental health issues, including either bipolar disorder or depressive disorder. He also suffered from Graves' disease, which affects thyroid hormones, and he also drank a lot of alcohol. Additionally, the defense introduced the concept of the gay panic defense. This defense is used to describe a situation where the person reacts violently because they feel threatened or uncomfortable by unwanted sexual advances from someone of the same sex. They argued that Jonathan's reaction could be partly attributed to the state of panic and discomfort which worsened his emotional instability and turned him violent during the trial. It also came to light that Jonathan had expressed concerns about being perceived as gay in conversations with his father. Jonathan had mentioned his fear that people would think he was gay if they saw him on the show. It was also revealed that Jonathan's grandparents held homophobic views and had told him before that if a gay man was interested in him it meant he was perceived as gay. This type of pressure from the family might have led Jonathan to kill Scott during the trial. There was speculation that after Jonathan, Scott and Donna went for drinks at Bruss's upon returning to Michigan, there might have been an intimate encounter between Jonathan and Scott, although this has not been proved. But in the end the defense succeeded in convincing the jury that Jonathan's actions were classified as second-degree murder rather than first-degree murder. Jonathan Schmidge was eventually found guilty of second-degree murder and also convicted on the second count of felony firearm charges. The key difference between the two charges is that first-degree murder involves premeditation and intent, whereas second-degree murder is typically characterized by a lack of premeditation and a crime of passion or sudden anger. He was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, and he was also convicted of having a firearm during the commission of his crime. But on the 15th of September 1998 the Michigan Court of Appeals overturned Jonathan Schmidge's original sentencing. The defense had argued that they should have been allowed to remove a juror before the trial, though the reasons for this request were never fully clarified. The judge agreed that the trial had been unfair due to this issue, and a retrial was ordered when Schmidge reappeared in court in 1999. The scope of his trial was limited to second-degree murder only. This time the defense wanted to argue the case as manslaughter rather than murder, but it did not work. During the trial it became even more obvious to the prosecution that the crime was far from a simple mistake. The prosecution described it as cold-blooded and calculated, and even called it an execution rather than a crime of passion. In the end, Jonathan Schmidge received the same outcome as before. He was again sentenced for one count of second-degree murder and one count of felony firearm. The evidence at trial had shown that Schmidge planned his crime, buying a weapon and ammunition and then shooting the victim at close range not once but twice. The court's sentence was clear: the sentence of this court will strip you of your youth, but it will not strip you of your life. For the second-degree murder you are sentenced to 25 to 50 years. For the felony firearm charge you are sentenced to 2 years. These sentences are to be served consecutively. As this case has had huge media coverage, there are a lot of different opinions. While some believe that Jonathan Schmidge was mentally unfit, others think it was the show's fault from the get-go. But the Jenny Jones Show maintained that their show was not responsible for the murder and denied any misleading of Jonathan Schmidge before the shooting of the episode. But when pressed further, it was revealed that while the show claimed it could have been either gender, the reality was that Jonathan was led to believe it was more likely to be a woman. The trial found the show's producers negligent and initially awarded it $25 million to the Amador family, but this verdict was later overturned on appeal. The verdict is guilty of second-degree murder. Schmidge was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison. In a statement to her viewers, Jenny Jones had this to say: "As much as we all regret what happened, the fact is that this tragedy is about the actions of one individual." The Amador family sued the show, and Jenny Jones squirmed on the witness stand. Jonathan Schmidge had not been told that the topic was same-sex crush and that his murderer was a man. "I don't know what he was told that was the truth." The court ruled that Amador's murder was unforeseeable and believed that the show could not predict and prevent such an extreme outcome. Despite all that happened, the Amador family never received compensation for Scott's death. The Jenny Jones Show continued to air until 2003. Jenny Jones herself repeated that the media exaggerated the situation. In August 2017, Jonathan Schmidj was released from prison on parole. However, his brother Frank was not so happy about it. He said he wanted to know if he was released only based on his good behavior in prison. He wanted to make sure that Schmidj had undergone significant personal change, no longer held homophobic views, and received appropriate psychological care. A Michigan Department of Corrections spokesman confirmed that Schmidj's release was attributed to good behavior credit he got during his time in prison. Since his release, Schmidj has maintained a low profile and remains in Michigan. In 1999, in a very public trial against the show in which Jones herself took the stand for several days, a jury awarded Amateur's family $25 million. That ruling was later reversed. My brother knew that Schmidj felt the way he did before this happened. He wouldn't have gone on the show. Story 4. What could drive a wealthy father living in a $5 million mansion to commit the unthinkable? Was it the pressure of looming financial ruin, or something even darker hiding beneath the surface? We will be diving into a chilling and tragic story that shocked the community and left many questioning how wealth and status could mask such a deep underlying despair. This is the story of a man who, faced with the loss of his luxurious lifestyle, made a decision that would end in unimaginable horror. Our love and respect go out to all those who knew and loved the Kimmel family. The town of Dover, Massachusetts is renowned for its wealth and exclusivity. It was in this town that the Kimmel family lived in an expansive 21-room mansion which was equipped with luxurious amenities like an at-home spa and a private movie theater. The head of the family, Rakesh Rick Kimmel, held a prestigious position at Harvard University, and his wife Tina Kimmel was also a graduate of the same esteemed institution. Their daughter Ariana Kimmel attended the elite Milton Academy with her college tuition already paid for at Berry College in Vermont. From an outsider's perspective, the Kimmel were living an ideal life of prosperity and success. However, beneath this perfect exterior, the Kimmel were facing significant financial difficulties that would eventually lead to a shocking crime that no one could have foreseen. The Kimmel family's carefully constructed image of a perfect life shattered on December 28, 2023. Their impending eviction scheduled for that day was the catalyst for a horrific tragedy. A typed note found inside the mansion warned anyone entering to contact the police and investigate 3 specific second-floor bedrooms. Each room was marked with a white sheet of paper concealing a scary discovery. Ariana and Tina were discovered in their bedrooms, victims of gunshot wounds. Kimmel, the father, was found dead in the bathtub, having taken his own life with an unregistered Glock pistol. After murdering his family, the once carefully maintained Kimmel home fell into a grave silence, shattered only by the evidence of a brutal crime. As detectives dug deeper into the Kimmel family's life, they found a troubling story. Months before the terrible events, the family had declared bankruptcy. Kimmel, the father, had been borrowing large amounts of money from his mother and brother. Just a few days before the murders, Kimmel made a suspicious change to Tina's $1 Ion 25,000 life insurance policy. Instead of being the primary beneficiary, he changed it so his brother Minhaj Kimmel would receive the money. This change happened only 4 days before the murders. The sudden change in the life insurance policy was a major red flag. It suggested that Kimmel might have been planning to kill his family. Ironically, Minhaj, who had lent Kimmel a lot of money, was the one who found the bodies. This discovery revealed the full extent of the Kimmel family's financial problems and deception. Kimmel's facade of success had been crumbling for years. Despite claiming to have held a high-ranking position at Harvard, he had actually lost his job at 2019, but he kept the secret from his family. Tina, who claimed to have attended Harvard, had no proof of her education there. These inconsistencies suggest that the Kimmel family had been living a life of deception both to themselves and to others. Kimmel's financial difficulties were dire. He was behind on mortgage payments for their mansion and resorted to elaborate lies to delay developers who were owed millions of dollars. He even went so far as to claim that Tina's father had died in India when in reality he was still alive. Despite these mounting problems, Kamal continued to portray an image of wealth and prosperity. He and Tina even toured a $6,500 home in Tennessee, maintaining the illusion of affluence. Their daughter Ariana was likely unaware of the family's dire financial straits. With the foreclosure of their home imminent, Kamal's pressure reached a breaking point. Desperate to maintain the illusion of success, he was overwhelmed by the reality of their impending eviction. On December 23, 2023, Kamal made a peculiar request to his brother asking for information about his life insurance policy, a request that Minaj found unsettling. Kamal had carefully planned the murders. By December 28, the day the Kamalses were scheduled to be evicted from their mansion, he had drafted several suicide notes and carefully staged the tragic events that would unfold. When Minaj arrived at the home, the alarm was blaring and he was met with the horrifying aftermath of his brother's actions. The discovery of the Kamal family's bodies shocked their affluent neighborhood. The police found out that Kamal was in big trouble with money and saw no way out except to kill his family and himself. Their big house, which used to show how rich they were, became a crime scene that told a different story. The police learned how Kamal had lied to his family about losing his job and how he was trying to buy a new house even though they couldn't pay for the one they had. It was sad that the Kamals were looking at new houses while they were about to lose their own. After the killings, people started talking about the life insurance money that Kamal had changed before he died. His brother Minaj was now going to get the money instead. Tina's brother didn't think this was right and said that Kamal had tricked Tina into signing the papers. There was a big fight between the two families over the money. Till now, people still wonder if Tina really wanted to give the money to her brother, and if she was forced to sign the papers. Family massacres, often referred to as familicides, are profoundly unsettling and tragic events that involve the killing of multiple family members by one of their own, usually a parent. The act of taking the lives of loved ones, particularly within the intimate and supposedly safe confines of a family, strikes at the very heart of human values and the fundamental notion of kinship. The sheer horror of such incidents compels society to seek explanations, to understand the psychological and social factors that could drive someone to commit such a heinous crime. Despite extensive research, the reasons behind these acts remain complex and rooted in a web of psychological, social, and cultural influences. Psychologically, individuals who commit familicide often exhibit signs of severe mental distress, depression, particularly when it leads to feelings of hopelessness and despair, is a common threat in many cases. For some perpetrators, the burden of providing for their family or maintaining their role as a protector becomes overwhelming, especially when faced with financial ruin, legal issues, or other significant life challenges. Individuals who commit familicide typically suffer from severe mental health conditions that distort their thinking and perceptions. These conditions may include depression, anxiety, psychosis, or personality disorders. For instance, a person experiencing major depressive disorder may develop a sense of hopelessness so profound that they believe there is no escape from their circumstances, leading them to view death as the only solution for themselves and their family. Psychological distress can be exacerbated by other factors such as substance abuse, which impairs judgment and heightens aggression. Some individuals may also have a history of trauma, unresolved grief, or chronic stress that erodes their coping mechanisms over time. As psychological pressure mounts, these individuals may experience a break from reality, leading them to see familicide as a way to regain control or to save their family from perceived suffering. In extreme cases, delusional thinking can convince them that killing their loved ones is an act of mercy or protection. In other instances, the drive behind familicide is rooted in narcissism and a profound need for control. Perpetrators with narcissistic traits often view their family members not as independent beings, but as extensions of themselves when their control over their family is threatened, perhaps by a spouse's desire for divorce or by the perceived failure of family members to meet their expectations. Their response can be one of extreme violence. For these individuals, the murders may be seen as a way to punish those they believe have wronged them, or to reclaim control over a situation that feels out of their grasp. Unlike those driven by depression, narcissistic perpetrators are less likely to take their own lives after the act, as their primary motivation is to assert dominance rather than to escape despair. In more severe cases, familicide can be the result of psychosis or delusional beliefs. Individuals suffering from conditions such as paranoid schizophrenia may become convinced that their family members are a threat or are in danger from some external force. These delusions can be so compelling that the perpetrator believes they are acting in the best interests of their family or themselves by carrying out the murders. The usual moral and ethical considerations that would prevent someone from harming their loved ones are overridden by the overwhelming power of their delusional thinking, leading to acts of violence that are incomprehensible to those not suffering from such a disorder. Social isolation and alienation are also significant factors in some cases of familicide. When individuals feel cut off from the broader community, whether due to mental illness, cultural differences, or personal circumstances, they may become increasingly withdrawn and paranoid. This isolation can amplify feelings of resentment, anger, and despair, distorting their perception of reality. In such situations, the family unit may become the only focus of the individual's life, and when these relationships begin to deteriorate through divorce, infidelity, or other issues, their sense of identity and purpose may collapse. This collapse can lead to violent behavior as the individual desperately tries to regain control or exact revenge. The psychological underpinnings of familicide do not operate in a vacuum. External factors often exacerbate them. Economic stress, for example, is a frequent trigger. Financial difficulties such as job loss, mounting debt, or foreclosure can create intense pressure within a family. The stress can be particularly overwhelming for individuals who tie their sense of identity and self-worth to their financial success or ability to provide for their family. When faced with economic hardship, some individuals may perceive themselves as failures, leading to feelings of shame, guilt, and despair. For many, the inability to maintain their family's standard of living can result in a profound sense of hopelessness. They may begin to see no way out of their financial problems and might irrationally believe that taking their own life and the lives of their loved ones is the only way to avoid further suffering. This is especially true in situations where the family's economic decline is sudden and drastic, leaving little time for adjustment or support. The stress of economic hardship can also exacerbate existing mental health issues or trigger new ones. For instance, a previously stable person may develop depression or anxiety due to financial pressures, increasing the risk of extreme actions. In some cases, economic stress can lead to an escalation of domestic violence as the perpetrator attempts to regain control in the only way they know how, through violence. For some, the perceived failure to provide may lead them to conclude that the only solution is to end their family's lives and their own to escape the unbearable burden of failure. Relationship breakdowns such as divorce, separation, or infidelity are also common catalysts for familicide. The end of a marriage or a romantic relationship can trigger intense emotional responses, especially in individuals already grappling with psychological issues. For some, the dissolution of a relationship is perceived not just as a personal failure but as an existential threat, leading to a distorted belief that their family would be better off dead than living in a fractured home. In other cases, the act of murder may be driven by a desire for revenge against a spouse perceived as betraying or abandoning the perpetrator. Further illustrating the destructive potential of intense emotional turmoil, cultural and societal influences also play a role in familicide. Though these factors are often more subtle and pervasive in some cultures, there is a strong emphasis on family honor and reputation when an individual believes that their family has been dishonored, either by external forces or the actions of family members. They may feel compelled to commit acts of violence to restore that honor. Moreover, societal attitudes toward mental illness, masculinity and family roles can significantly influence an individual's behavior in societies where mental illness is stigmatized. Individuals may be less likely to seek help even when they are in crisis, leading to a deterioration in their mental state that increases the likelihood of violent behavior. Similarly, societal expectations of masculinity, particularly the role of the father as protector and provider, can create intense pressure on men, potentially leading them to commit familicide when they feel they can no longer fulfill these roles. The availability of weapons, particularly firearms, is another significant factor in many cases of familicide. The presence of a gun in the home can turn a moment of rage or despair into a deadly encounter. Research has shown that access to firearms increases the likelihood of homicide and suicide, a risk that is particularly pronounced in domestic settings in societies where gun ownership is common and culturally accepted. The risk of familicide may be higher as the presence of a firearm can make it easier for an individual to act on impulse, turning a momentary lapse in judgment into a permanent tragedy. Preventing family violence requires a complex approach that addresses the root causes and intervenes at critical junctures. Family violence often arises from a combination of psychological, social, and economic pressures, and preventing it involves strategies that target these factors comprehensively. Understanding the psychology behind such acts, strengthening social support systems, improving financial stability, and enhancing early intervention mechanisms are all critical components of a prevention strategy. One of the primary strategies for preventing familicide is to address the mental health issues that often underlie these acts. Many individuals who commit familicide suffer from severe mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, or personality disorders, which can lead to distorted thinking and a sense of hopelessness. Mental health services must be readily accessible and destigmatized, allowing individuals in crisis to seek help without fear of judgment or repercussions. Public health campaigns should promote mental health awareness, encouraging people to recognize the signs of severe psychological distress in themselves and others by fostering an environment where mental health is openly discussed and supported. Society can reduce the risk of individuals reaching a breaking point where they might consider such extreme actions. Social isolation is another vital risk factor for familicide. Individuals who are isolated from their communities and support networks are more likely to feel disconnected, hopeless, and overwhelmed by their circumstances. Preventing familicide requires building strong, supportive communities where individuals feel connected and valued. Community organizations, religious groups, and social services should work together to create networks of support that can identify and assist individuals and families in crisis. Encouraging community engagement and fostering a sense of belonging can help mitigate the feelings of isolation and despair that often precede familicide. Domestic violence is a significant precursor to familicide, particularly in cases where the perpetrator has a history of controlling or abusive behavior. Preventing familicide requires addressing domestic violence at its root through education, intervention, and support for survivors. Public awareness campaigns should emphasize the warning signs of domestic violence and the importance of seeking help early. Law enforcement and social services must be equipped to respond effectively to reports of domestic violence, providing protection and resources to those at risk. Additionally, It is essential to hold perpetrators of domestic violence accountable, ensuring that they receive appropriate legal consequences and treatment for their behavior. By intervening early in cases of domestic violence, society can prevent the escalation to more extreme forms of violence such as familicide. Another critical strategy for preventing familicide is to promote healthy family dynamics and communication. Families that struggle with unresolved conflicts, poor communication, or dysfunctional relationships are more vulnerable to extreme outcomes. Programs that teach conflict resolution, communication skills, and emotional intelligence can help families navigate challenges more effectively, reducing the risk of violence. Parenting programs in particular can provide valuable support to parents who may be struggling with stress, anger, or other emotions that can contribute to family conflict. By fostering healthy family relationships, society can create an environment where family suicide is less likely to occur. Early intervention is essential in preventing familicide, mainly when warning signs are present. Individuals who are at risk of committing familicide often exhibit certain behaviors or attitudes, such as expressing feelings of hopelessness, making threats, or displaying extreme anger. It is essential for family members, friends, and professionals to be vigilant in recognizing these warning signs and to take them seriously. Interventions such as counseling, mental health treatment, or legal action may be necessary to prevent a situation from escalating to violence. Training for professionals who work with families, such as teachers, social workers, and healthcare providers, can help them identify and respond to potential risks before they result in tragedy. Law enforcement also plays a critical role in preventing familicide, mainly when there are explicit threats or a history of violence. Police officers must be trained to recognize the signs of potential familicide, and effectively this may involve restraining orders, mandatory counseling, or other legal measures to protect those at risk. Additionally, law enforcement agencies should work closely with mental health professionals and social services to ensure a coordinated response to individuals who may be at risk of committing familicide. By taking threats seriously and acting decisively, law enforcement can prevent potential tragedies. In some cases, the media can contribute to the risk of familicide by sensationalizing similar events or by creating a narrative that normalizes extreme actions as a response to stress or failure. Media coverage should be handled with care, avoiding the glorification of perpetrators and instead focusing on the impact of the crime on victims and communities. Responsible reporting can help prevent copycat incidents by not providing potential perpetrators with a blueprint for violence. Additionally, the media can play a positive role in prevention by raising awareness of the resources available for individuals in crisis and by highlighting stories of resilience and recovery. Ultimately, preventing familicide requires a holistic approach that addresses the complex interactions between psychological, social, and economic factors. It is not enough to focus on any one aspect in isolation. Instead, society must take a comprehensive approach that integrates mental health support, economic stability, social connection, domestic violence prevention, healthy family dynamics, early intervention, law enforcement action, and responsible media coverage. By addressing these factors in tandem, society can reduce the likelihood that individuals will resort to such extreme actions and can protect vulnerable families from tragedy. Prevention also involves ongoing research and data collection to understand better the causes and risk factors associated with familicide. Researchers must continue to study the phenomenon, analyzing patterns and identifying effective interventions. This research can inform public policy, guiding the development of programs and services that address the needs of at-risk individuals and families. By continually refining our understanding of familicide and its prevention, society can adapt its strategies to meet emerging challenges and protect families from harm. Prevention efforts should also focus on building resilience within individuals and communities. Resilience is the ability to cope with and recover from adversity, and it can be a critical factor in preventing familicide programs that promote resilience, teach individuals how to manage stress, seek help when needed, and maintain a positive outlook even in difficult circumstances. Building resilience within families and communities can help mitigate the factors that contribute to familicide, creating a buffer against the pressures that can lead to violence. Resilience building programs should be integrated into schools, workplaces, and community organizations, ensuring that individuals have the skills and resources they need to cope with challenges in healthy ways. Also, addressing societal norms and attitudes that contribute to familicide is essential. In some cases, cultural beliefs about masculinity, power, and control can exacerbate the risk of familicide, particularly in patriarchal societies where men may feel entitled to dominate their families. Public education campaigns should challenge these harmful norms, promoting values of equality, respect, and nonviolence. Story 5. Easter Sunday in 1975 started off as a normal Easter holiday for the Rupert family, but soon turned into a nightmare that is now dubbed as the deadliest family massacre in American history. Stay tuned as we uncover how a seemingly harmless managed to murder 11 members of his family. James Urban Rupert was born on March 29, 1934 to his mother Charity and father Leonard Rupert. He, along with his older brother Leonard Jr., grew up in Hamilton, Ohio. However, their small family was far from normal, as Leonard Sr., who was known to have a violent temper, made his children's childhood traumatic. To make matters worse, Charity picked her favorites when the boys were still young, always favoring her brighter and more confident older child Leonard over her younger son. James grew up in a hostile environment and was often told by his mother that she wished he was never born, since she wanted a daughter in his place. As expected from a child who grew up without parental affection, this negatively impacted Rupert's self-confidence, and he grew up to become a loner. His parents' carelessness constantly cost him, including his father's insistence on keeping chickens around their house, causing him to develop an allergy to the feathers. Despite his allergy, his parents showed little to no concern for his well-being as they continued to keep the chickens around. When Rupert turned 12 in 1947, his father became deathly ill and soon died of tuberculosis. However, his days of torment were far from over, as his older brother quickly took over their father's role and went out of his way to harass his younger brother. As a result, Rupert's performance in school was severely lacking as compared to his brother, with no friends to offer him any support. Rupert found himself dealing with everything on his own as Charity continued to ignore his existence. The constant bullying at home and school got so bad that at the age of 16 Rupert decided to end things once and for all. He took sheets from his home and tried to hang himself. However, he failed to succeed in his suicidal attempt. This marked an important event in Rupert's life, as he stopped making any effort towards improving his life and accepted his fate as the inferior son. This became Rupert's first and only suicide attempt. Not surprisingly, Rupert grew to hate both his brother and mother. By the time he reached college, he stood at 5 feet 6 inches in and only weighed 135 pounds. He spent 2 years in college before giving up on it as well, while his brother once again surpassed him and graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. It helped that Leonard Jr. had his mother's full support. His resentment towards his brother grew to a dangerous level when Leonard Jr. married one of Rupert's former girlfriends named Alma, a girl that he never lost feelings for. This would later be cited as a motive for his rampage. Rupert began to feel as if the entire world was against him and resigned himself to an unremarkable life. Accepting defeat, he trained to become a draftsman but remained unemployed for the majority of his life, leaving him with no choice but to continue living with his mother, often borrowing money from her and Leonard Jr. While his brother not only managed to get a job with General Electric, he also bought a House in Fairfield where he lived with Alma and their 8 children: 17-year-old Leonard, 3 16-year-old Michael, 15-year-old Thomas, 13-year-old Carol, 12-year-old and 11 years old David, 9-year-old Teresa and 4-year-old John. Perhaps because he was so frustrated with his life, Rupert developed an affinity for guns. Among his collection he had a .357 Magnum, 2.22 handguns and a .22 rifle. Two things became ritual for Rupert: drinking and target practicing. Rupert had turned to drinking to deal with the toxic environment at home as well as to numb his feelings of inferiority as he got older and remained unemployed. Charity, tired of his drinking, threatened to evict him unless he paid rent. However, since he had lost all of his money during the stock market crash of 1973 to 1974, Rupert had no way to pay his portion of the rent. Although Charity intended for this threat to motivate him to get his life back on track, she unknowingly pushed him towards his breaking point. As the threat of eviction loomed over his head, Rupert began to approach his breaking point. While purchasing ammunition one day, he inquired about silencers but did not end up going through with the purchase. On March 29, 1975, Rupert turned 41. On his birthday he was seen at the Great Miami River in Hamilton shooting cans, and this became pivotal in helping the prosecution build their case against him. It can be argued that he was possibly preparing for one of the deadliest nights in Hamilton, Ohio. That night, Rupert stumbled into a bar called the 19th Hole Cocktail Lounge. He met 28-year-old mother of 5 Wanda Bishop, who worked at the cocktail lounge, and confessed that his mother was threatening to evict him if he failed to find a job to pay for his portion of the rent. Charity had told him that if he could afford to pay for his drinks he could pay her rent as well. Wanda recalled that Rupert insisted that he had to find a way to solve the problem. Rupert stayed in the cocktail lounge until 11 p.m. before leaving, but soon returned and continued drinking until the lounge closed at 2:30 a.m. When Wanda asked him if he had managed to resolve his problem, Rupert replied, "No, not yet." The next morning, Charity, who was not feeling well, called Leonard Jr. and his family for Easter dinner instead of an early lunch at their house, 635 Minor Avenue. Once Leonard Jr. and Alma arrived, their children participated in an Easter egg hunt outside while Rupert slept in late, nursing a hangover from the previous night. By the time he got up at 4 p.m. everyone had moved inside to continue the celebration, while Charity prepared sloppy joes for the family and Alma helped put them together. Rupert stayed with the family for a short while before returning upstairs to retrieve a .357 Magnum, 2.22 handguns and a rifle. He intended to head to a shooting range to spend his day, but as he was leaving his brother asked him. Rupert took this as an insult, as Leonard Jr.'s comments reminded him of his own failure to lead a successful life like his brother. Instead of leaving for the shooting range as planned, Rupert made a split-second decision that not only altered the trajectory of his life forever but also robbed 11 people of their lives. At 6 p.m. Charity, Leonard, Alma, their son David and daughters Tessa and Carol, who were in the kitchen, became Rupert's first victims as he fired off several shots in rapid succession, hitting all of them in the chest except for his mother, whom he shot in the head as she jumped at him to try and prevent him from killing anyone else. He then moved to the living room where he shot his niece and Leonard, 3 Michael and John. After his initial shots, Rupert went around and shot everyone several more times to make sure that they were dead after the initial shooting, and if people were moaning and groaning still, he shot them in the head. The entire ordeal took less than 5 minutes, with Rupert only stopping in the middle to reload. All in all, he fired 44 shots, out of which 40 hit the victims. After making sure that everyone was dead, Rupert sat with his family's dead bodies for 3 hours contemplating suicide, but decided that since it was a mortal sin he did not want it to be his last act. After 3 hours he decided to make a 911 call. He told the 911 dispatcher that there has been a shooting as his relatives took their last breaths around him. Rupert sat on the couch. He waited there for 3 to 4 hours before he called police to tell them someone's been shot. When officers arrived at the scene a few minutes later, Rupert greeted them at the front door. At first glance, the officers did not suspect that anything sinister was waiting for them beyond the front door, since Rupert, with his short stature and thick black framed glasses, did not fit into the usual description of a murderer. As the officers entered the house, they were in for the shock of a lifetime. One of the responding officers also reported that he had never seen anything like the crime scene before him, and that he had to rush to the side to throw up. There was so much blood on the floors that it had seeped through the wooden floorboards and was dripping into the basement. There was no sign of struggle inside the house except for an overturned trash can, indicating that because the family had not expected this, they did not have enough time to react. As the Hamilton Police Department was made aware of the shocking discovery, they immediately covered the area with police tape. As people began to gather around, the small community that had known the Rupert family as a loving family was taken by surprise at the tragedy, and was even more horrified to find that the helpful and modest man they had known their whole lives was behind the murders. The first body to leave the house was of little John, with his sneaker peeking out of the sheet drawn over him. Dread began to fill everyone as one by one 11 stretchers were brought out of the house, all carrying the now dead members of the Rupert family. Full sight was in 2 rooms of a modest 2-story Hamilton home where James Rupert lived with his mother. In 2 rooms, 11 bodies, including Rupert's mother, Rupert's brother, his brother's wife, and their 8 children, the oldest 17, the youngest a 4-year-old boy. Rupert was arrested on the counts of 11 aggravated homicides. Despite being known as a demure but helpful man, Rupert remained uncooperative with the officers and refused to answer any of their questions. Investigators struggled to find a motive, since the suspect in custody refused to say anything. During the initial questioning, it was made clear by Rupert that he planned on pleading insanity. The prosecutors believed that Rupert planned on taking advantage of the $300,000 worth of inheritance left by both his brother and mother in the form of their properties and assets. By pleading guilty, he would serve time at a court-appointed facility before being released and getting hold of the inheritance. This case led to 2 high-profile trials. During the initial trial, Rupert admitted to killing his family but pleaded innocent by reason of insanity. Rupert was represented by Hugh D. Halbrook, who became so dedicated to the case that he even personally funded the hiring of psychiatrists and psychologists from all over the country to testify in favor of Rupert's insanity plea. 2 psychiatrists who were brought on by his defense team concluded that Rupert suffered from paranoia and delusions of persecution that were brought on by the beatings he had endured during his early life at the hands of his brother. This is why they argued he had been unable to control his actions at the time of the crime. Harvard University psychiatrist Dr. Lester Ginspoon supplied his expert opinion, claiming that if more people were present in the house, Rupert might have killed them as well, pushing the narrative that Rupert did not have a solid motive other than insanity. After the slaughter, James Rupert changed his clothes and called the cops. He was charged and tried for 11 murders. His attorneys said he killed during a psychotic rage. They said he was insane. Along those same lines, Doctor, isn't it true that you have no way of telling the court what Mr. Rupert's ability to rationally discuss the case with his attorneys to rationally assist in the preparation of a defense would be if he were not under the effect of either a major tranquilizer such as Thorazine or Trilfan at this time? Isn't that right? I have no specific way of telling that other than to say that during the course of my examination with him, he was able at that time and under that condition with that dosage of medication to rationally confer with me and talk to me about what had happened. At the same time, the prosecution argued that Rupert planned to misuse the insanity plea to inherit the $300,000 inheritance. He murdered his family to collect his brother's $300,000 or so in life insurance. That's what I think the evidence showed, and that's what I believe. Instead of having his case presented in front of a jury, Rupert decided to have his case tried in front of 3 judges. However, he was incorrectly told that all 3 of the judges would have to agree unanimously on a decision. 2 out of the 3 judges found Robert Rupert sane and convicted him on 11 counts of aggravated murder. He was sentenced to serve 11 consecutive life sentences. During 1975, the United States had banned the death penalty, saving Rupert from being given a death sentence. The 3rd Hamilton County Judge Fred Kramer, however, found Rupert insane between the years 1977 and 1978. The Supreme Court of Ohio ruled that there had been a mistrial, since the judges did not know whether they needed to unanimously agree on a decision or have a majority rule. Rupert was granted another trial that was determined to be held in Findlay, Ohio, since it was deemed that he could not receive a fair trial in the city of Hamilton. On July 23, 1975, the new trial began, where Rupert and his defense team once again argued for the insanity plea. However, the prosecution, led by John Holcomb, brought forward 29 witnesses and presented 200 exhibits in court, successfully building a different line of reasoning. He argued that his inquiry into the silencers, practicing his shooting, and talking about his mother as a problem that needed to be resolved were all pointing towards the fact that this mass murder was a carefully plotted crime, especially given the fact that the shooting had been carried out at a time when the church bells had begun ringing, hence drowning out the noise from the gunshots, preventing anyone from calling the authorities. He went on to say that Rupert planned on aiming for the insanity plea because that would ensure that he would be sent to the Lima State Mental Hospital, where he would eventually be declared sane. This would allow him to easily inherit the $300,000 worth of inheritance left behind by Leonard and Charity, which he would not be able to do if he was convicted of murder. Based on the prosecution's convincing argument, Rupert was once again sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences. A few years later, in 1982, on appeal, Rupert was granted another trial, where his defense attorney was able to convince the jury to grant him an insanity plea. Rupert was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for his brother and mother, but found not guilty for the remaining 9 counts of murder by reason of insanity. The only family member to attend the trial was Alma's mother, Edna Algie. She blamed Rupert for 13 deaths, including her husband, who took his own life 3 years after the incident on Easter Day, as well as a juror who collapsed during the trial and died of a heart attack when Edna passed away. Her headstone proclaimed that she was preceded by 8 grandchildren. At the age of 48, Rupert was incarcerated by the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction at the Franklin Medical Center in Columbus. 13 years later, at the age of 61, Rupert was granted another parole hearing by the state parole board but was denied release. He was granted 2 more parole hearings, one in 2005 and another one in 2015. During all of these parole hearings, he was denied release. During his last hearing in 2015, the Allen Oakwood Correctional Institutional Parole Board released a statement that indicated that Rupert was not suitable for release due to his negative institutional conduct, as well as a strong community objection to his release. 7 years later, Rupert died at the age of 88 of natural causes, having spent 47 years in prison. A man who shot and killed 11 family members on Easter 1975 has died. James Rupert died over the weekend at Franklin Medical Center in Columbus at the age of 88. The Hamilton Journal News says that he died of natural causes. The Rupert family was buried in Arlington Memorial Garden in Cincinnati, Ohio. A year after the heinous mass murder, the house was opened up to the public. The Rupert family's Belongings were auctioned off and the hardwood floors were covered with a carpet in places where blood stains were. Harder to remove, the house was rented to a family who was unaware of the house's history. As soon as they found out, they moved out, complaining of hearing strange voices and other unexplained noises too. This day the house remains occupied. Even today the Easter Sunday massacre is remembered as one of the deadliest family massacres in America. A book called The Easter Sunday Massacre, a prosecutor's diary. The true story of mass murderer James Rupert, written by the lead prosecutor John's daughter-in-law Karen Holcomb, was published with the help of his notes left behind after his death. Karen Holcomb first became familiar with this case in the 1990s when she was a reporter for the journal News. She didn't know at the time that her coverage would lead to her marrying the prosecutor's son and decades later taking her late father-in-law's words and crafting them into a book that details the trauma left behind after this tragedy. Story 6. They say that the saddest thing about betrayal is it never comes from your enemies, it comes from those you trust the most. Finding a genuine life partner is something most people dream of, but as we'll see in today's case, not everyone gets one. Laura thought she had found the man of her dreams, and despite their rocky relationship she kept giving him chances until one day he betrayed her in the worst possible way. This case is a cautionary tale about how people don't change, they just get better at hiding who they really are. Keep watching to learn what happened. Laura Gill was born on August 17, 1978 in Baltimore, Maryland. In 2008 she was a single divorced mother living with her 2 children. Times were rough. The 2008 financial crisis led to many layoffs and it took a toll on many families, but Laura kept her head up and did her best. While playing video games one day she began chatting with John Mris, a Greek businessman. Laura, having recently separated from her husband, was feeling lonely and vulnerable, so they started talking regularly through email, text messages and phone calls. After around 6 months of communication, Laura decided to move with her children to Rolla, Texas, to be closer to Mris in Texas. Laura worked 2 jobs to afford her own residence near him. Mris became a huge source of support for Laura and developed a loving relationship with her children, which Laura greatly appreciated. She was optimistic about the future. Mris didn't seem to have any red flags, at least at first. In 2010 Laura discovered she was pregnant with his child. The couple was overjoyed to learn that they were expecting a daughter. By all accounts, Mris proved to be an excellent father. He actively took part in child care duties, including changing diapers, playing with his daughter, taking her to the park and showering her with affection. Their daughter Maria became the center of his world. Following Maria's birth, Laura and her 3 children moved into Macker's home and officially became a blended family. Laura assumed the role of a stay-at-home mother, caring for the children, and she was pretty happy with this arrangement. She also invited her brother Brian, who was on the autism spectrum and had hearing impairments, to live with them. This living situation was helpful for Brian, and Mris had no issues with it either. He welcomed him into the family. Laura and Mris jointly established a home remodeling business in November 2014. They both completed the Citizens Police Academy program and became volunteers for police services. Their volunteer work included administrative tasks, community surveillance, search and rescue assistance, and issuing parking violation citations. As time went on, however, friends noticed that something was not right between the two. They were beginning to experience real difficulties that they hid from the world. In June 2015, Laura's patience with Mris had run out. Friends noticed that she was often sad and withdrawn while he was possessive and jealous. Laura decided to end the relationship while Mris was away on a trip. Instead of telling this to his face, she decided to break up with him over email. Now this might seem like a super impersonal way to do it, especially since he was the father of her child, but it's entirely possible that Laura was afraid of him physically lashing out on her. In her email, Laura shared many grievances she had with the relationship. First, Laura talked about all the difficulties she faced for 4 years and mentioned that she refused to continue the same pattern for another decade. She brought up challenging times during her pregnancy, including MRI and his family's doubts about the paternity of their daughter. The situation had gotten so bad she was forced to take a paternity test. Suffice to say, this can be quite a humiliating experience for any expecting mother. Laura acknowledged that there were a lot of good times, but the relationship had deteriorated so much over time that it wasn't worth continuing. She was concerned about the impact of their constant arguing on their children. Finally, Laura stated that she wanted to focus on caring for them by herself. This ended up being the most alarming part of the email, and one that would set into motion the tragedy that unfolded shortly after. Laura said that she will move away from Texas for better job opportunities and to provide a better life for her children. She ended the email by requesting MRIs for some extra time to find a job and save money. Before moving out of their shared home, she also informed him that she had already discussed the situation with the children and prepared them for the changes, including the idea of a school transfer. Unsurprisingly, upon receiving this news, MRIs reacted strongly. He returned home immediately. MRIs begged her to reconsider the relationship and tried to reconcile with her. He refused to lose Laura, her children, and their daughter Maria. Nobody knows why, but Laura decided to stay with Marquis after he begged her to not leave. Maybe there was too much at stake, or maybe she wanted the stability of a two-parent home. Nevertheless, what happened next is something Laura could never have anticipated. In July 2015, MRIs made a life-changing decision. He proposed to marry Laura in front of her 3 children and her brother, and the couple seemingly patched things up. Laura accepted his proposal, marking what they hoped would be a fresh start for their relationship and putting old problems behind. Over the next 4 months, Laura immersed herself in planning their wedding. She chose her best friend Heather as her matron of honor and asked her brother to walk her down the aisle. MRIs meanwhile selected his co-worker Jesus Trevino to be his best man. At the time, nobody knew this, but his co-worker was hiding a horrible secret, one that would be uncovered after the tragedy. Friday, November 13, 2015 began as a typical day. It was now only 8 days before MRIs and Laura's scheduled wedding. Laura left home early to take the children to school, while MRIs went to Home Depot with his mother, who was visiting for the wedding. They were purchasing supplies for their business. Laura returned home between 8:10 and 8:22 a.m. MRIs attempted to call her at 8:39 a.m. and again at 8:46 a.m., but she didn't answer. At 9:58 am, MRIs along with his 2 co-workers Trevino and James Valida were at the Home Depot on Lemon Avenue in Dallas purchasing doors. This location was 44 minutes away from MRIs and Laura's home. From there, the group, including MR's mother, drove to another Home Depot on Forest Central Drive, which was 22 minutes from the first Home Depot. Surveillance cameras at these locations confirmed their presence. At 11:38 am, the school contacted MRIs, inquiring if someone would be picking up his daughter. After multiple unanswered calls to Laura, MRIs reached out to a neighbor and asked them to check on Laura at their home. At the same time, Laura's brother Brian woke up and entered the kitchen. There he discovered a sight that would haunt him forever. He saw a female lying face down in a pool of blood, clutching onto her purse. Reeling from the shock, he didn't immediately recognize who it was. Thinking it was Macker's mother, Brian immediately dialed 911. A little while later, the neighbor arrived at the house, along with the police. As the police waited for the medical examiner to arrive at the scene, they quickly began to investigate the house. Upon examining the house, the police made some very important discoveries. First, there were No signs of forced entry, and the front door featured a push-button lock and unlock mechanism. Perhaps the attacker was probably someone who was known to the family. Next, they discovered shell casings from a .40 caliber weapon, a type more commonly associated with law enforcement than civilian use. This detail narrowed it down a bit more. In the bedroom, an open safe was found with its contents scattered about. Drawers and jewelry boxes had been emptied, and it was later reported to the police that a necklace valued at thousands of dollars was missing along with cash. They speculated that Laura may have interrupted a burglary in progress. The investigators proceeded to collect fingerprint and blood evidence from the scene. As the search continued, MRIs arrived at the scene. Desperate for answers, the officers gave him the little information they had about this heinous crime, as the identity of victim could not be confirmed without disturbing the crime scene. After the medical examiner's arrival, they carefully turned over the victim's body. To everyone's shock, the victim was Laura Grill. She was holding her Relit ID card in her hand. The examination revealed that Laura had been shot once above her left eye, with the bullet lodging behind her right ear. The presence of Laura's purse at the scene led police to conclude that she had been attacked almost immediately after returning home. The police first interviewed Laura's brother. He told police he had been asleep all morning and that he had woken up and found the body, but he had never heard the gunshot. At that point, they were viewing him with suspicion because he was at home during the crime, and not hearing a loud gunshot seemed impossible. However, he was later cleared after investigators learned about his hearing disability. He was completely deaf in one ear and partially deaf in the other. Next, investigators spoke with MRI, who seemed suspiciously unaffected by his fiancée's death. MRI was acting weird. It was almost like he was happy she was murdered. Rolet Police Department Detective Cruz Hernandez said he cried very lightly for about a minute. It struck me odd that there was a lack of emotion or very weak crying. It just seemed strange to me. He provided details about his trips to Home Depot. MRI maintained he had no knowledge of the murder and told detectives there had been about $8,000 to $9,000 in their home safe. MRI also passed a residue test, proving that he was not the one who fired the weapon. I want you to know that we're going to find out what happened. What would be the motive for someone to come in the house, attack Laura? Somebody chose to come in that house, but why? That's what we're going to find out. Did Laura receive any bad news? No. Next, the investigators interviewed MRI 2 co-workers who corroborated his account. CCTV footage also confirmed these stories. After leaving, McCree would talk to Laura's friend Heather and tell her that he felt the detectives were planning to pin Laura's death on him. This seems strange to Heather because there wasn't any information being released about the case or who had done it, but still at that point MRI seemed to be in the clear. A few days following Laura's murder, investigators reviewed video footage taken at the crime scene that had been captured by a police officer's body cam. When asked about who lived in his home at that time, Mockery mentioned Brian, the 3 children, himself and his visiting mother, but there was one important person he neglected to mention: Laura, his dead fiancée. This omission made everyone a little more than suspicious, particularly because at that point Mockery had not officially been informed that the victim in his house was his soon-to-be wife. So why didn't he say her name? What was he hiding? 3 days after Laura's murder, Mockery informed the investigators that he would no longer speak to them without an attorney present. Jesus is a dumbass, all right. At the end of the day, you shouldn't hire a dumbass to do a job because he's going to screw it up, all right, and if he doesn't screw it up, he's going to talk about it. I didn't hire the dumbass, that's my problem. Do what? I did not hire the dumbass, come on. I did not take him any money, that's my problem. I didn't have my mother killed. I tried to get married with her for at least 3 years. I loved her, I still love her. Say this: I'm sorry. Oh, I am sorry that my wife was killed. I cried so many times. I mean, you're telling me that You know, you're telling me that, basically admitting that I hired him to do the murder. That's what you're telling me. Am I telling you to admit that? No, I already know that you did that. I'm giving you an opportunity to tell the truth. I need to talk to the attorney. Detective Christopher Sawyer said. John didn't seem overly upset. They're about to be married in a week and he's not reacting the way that I would expect someone to act in that position. Mress exhibited other odd behavior, like immediately wanting to move back into his home and get rid of Laura's possessions. He even had the audacity to suggest using the wedding flowers for her funeral instead. It's something Laura's matron of honor found horrifying. The investigators also discovered the heated email Laura had written to Mrs. Belita was also interviewed, but the detectives took an aggressive approach with him. At first the officers decided to let him go because they didn't have concrete evidence, but that doesn't mean they were ready to give up. The officers offered him a ride back to his motel. Valida accepted it, but that might not have been the smartest move for him. Once they reached the motel room, the detective asked if he could search his room to clear him as a suspect. He agreed. But as the search went on, the atmosphere in the room began to get tenser. Suddenly, the investigators found a book bag under the bed. When they opened the bag, they found a pair of latex gloves and 2 burner phones. The detectives had just uncovered evidence that could tie Valida and Trevino to the crime by digging into the two men's pasts. Investigators learned they were both convicted sex offenders and that Trevino was a previously deported felon who was back in the U.S. illegally. The investigation then turned to cell phone records for the two suspects to track their movements on the morning of the crime. These records revealed that Trevino had been in Rolette that morning, contradicting his earlier statement about being in Dallas around 7:30 a.m. McCree was the one who was heading to Dallas while Trevino and Valida were traveling to Rolette. Trevino's phone pinged off towers only a mile away from Laura's home at 8:15 a.m. and 8:20 a.m. This was enough to show their guilt. On December 17, 2015, 5 weeks after Laura's death, police obtained an arrest warrant for Trevino for failing to register as a sex offender, but suddenly he had disappeared. The police turned to the media to find tips on his whereabouts. Fortunately, the strategy worked and they were able to contact Trevino's ex-girlfriend Lorena Rodriguez. She informed them that on December 13, 2014, weeks before Laura's murder, she had filed a police report. This is the report that would break the case wide open. The police report filed by Lorena contained alarming information. She stated that her boyfriend had been hired to commit murder. According to her statement, Trevino had told her a month prior that his boss had offered him $15,000 to kill his wife, or $5,000 to find someone who would. She repeatedly asked Trevino if he was serious, to which he consistently told her yes and claimed he was desperate for money. Lorena didn't know the identity of Trevino's boss or the would-be victim, or even the location or any specific details of the future crime. But she still decided to go ahead and file a report. The most unfortunate fact here is that this report was not taken seriously at all. Nobody followed up on it at the time. Investigators then obtained warrants to search Trevino's Google accounts. Their search uncovered a photograph of a woman holding a Springfield .40 caliber handgun which matched the caliber of the shell casing found at the crime scene. The woman in the photo was identified as another ex-girlfriend of Trevino residing in Colorado. Upon interviewing her, the police acquired Trevino's new cell phone number. This information led them to locate Trevino in Clearwater, Florida, where he was arrested by IC agents on April 1, 2016. He was escorted back to Dallas County. The investigation led to another of Trevino's friends named Ramon proved to be one of the biggest developments in the case. Detective Cruz said, "Before I could ask any questions, Ramon told me, I know why you're here. It's because Jesus killed the boss's wife." Detectives were then led to the apartment where the photo of Trevino's ex-girlfriend was taken. They interviewed The current resident, who was Trevino's former roommate, he revealed to the officers that Trevino had asked him to be the getaway driver many times, but it was an offer he had declined. On May 9, 2016, Vala was arrested for failing to register as a sex offender. After questioning by police and a Texas Ranger, Vala provided a full confession. He disclosed that Macri and Trevino had meticulously planned the details, including timing the getaway car routes through the neighborhood to avoid cameras and signals from MRI indicating when to proceed to roll it. Valida stated that Trevino had told him about being paid $15,000 by Macri to murder Laura. Vala cooperated with the police, showing them the getaway car and the route they had taken that morning. Law enforcement recovered the vehicle, a silver Kia which had been purchased on Craigslist specifically for use in the crime, and then abandoned. The investigation revealed that Trevino and Vala made several unsuccessful attempts to carry out their plan before the actual crime took place. On one occasion they aborted the attempt because a neighbor's garage door was open. 2 other attempts were also abandoned for undisclosed reasons. On the morning of Friday, November 13, 2015, Macri sent a text message to Trevino informing him that both he and Laura had left the house. Following this signal, Trevino and Vala drove to the Gillo home in the silver Kia they had purchased. Trevino, who was familiar with the house and knew the front door code, concealed a gun in his hoodie pocket before approaching the residence. Vala testified that he drove around the block and upon his return he saw Laura's van in the driveway. Trevino was standing outside wearing a hoodie, ski mask and gloves. On the morning of Laura's shooting, Trevino let himself inside the couple's home using the security code provided by Macri. He waited for Laura to return and then snuck up on the mother of 3 and shot her in the head. According to Vala, the money in the couple's safe was removed before the murder occurred. As Vala drove away, Trevino dismantled the gun into several pieces and placed them into his backpack. He also discarded his clothing and shoes out of the car window, one piece at a time. The pair then called Macri to confirm that the job was done. They proceeded to hotel to switch from the silver Kia to a black Lincoln. Before meeting MRI at Home Depot en route, they stopped at a gas station where Trevino gave Vala a garbage bag containing pieces of the dismantled gun, instructing him to dispose of it in a dumpster. That's right, The 2 men then met Mary and his mother at the Home Depot on Lemon Avenue to pick up doors from there. Macri and his mother traveled in his work truck while Trevino and Vala followed in the black Lincoln belonging to Trevino's girlfriend. The group then went to another Home Depot on Forest Avenue to purchase a microwave. At this location, Trevino paid Vala $1,000 for his role as the driver. After this, the group separated. Later, Macri received a call from the school informing him that no one had come to pick up Maria. MRI and his mother then went to collect Maria from school. After this, MRI received a call telling him to return home. In response, Macri contacted Laura's best friend, who was to be the matron of honor at their wedding, asking her to take care of the children. She complied, collecting and caring for the children during the events. On June 2, 2016, MRI was arrested and charged with the murder of Laura. This arrest connected the evidence gathered during the investigation. Valida, one of the accomplices, was offered a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against Macri and Trevino. As a result of his cooperation, Vala received a 25-year sentence. The investigation revealed that the motive for the murder stemmed from Laura's email to Macri expressing her desire to end their relationship. MRI, unwilling to lose custody of his daughter Maria, took drastic measures. Detective Sawyer said, "We felt like this was the reason why Laura was murdered, because she wanted out the relationship. And John did not want to lose her or the children as a result." A shocking fact is that just 20 minutes after receiving Laura's email, Macri forwarded it to Trevino. This awful plan had been a long time in the making. The entire time, Mock's marriage proposal was a ruse designed to keep her in the relationship long enough for him to execute his plan. Investigators believed that Mr's participation in the Citizens Police Academy had familiarized him with law enforcement procedures. This knowledge led him to believe he could outsmart the police and evade justice for his crime. But Mr's assumption was wrong. The thorough investigation and the evidence collected led to his conviction. Mocky was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in orchestrating Laura's murder. Trevino, the individual who carried out the actual killing, was also found guilty for his part in the crime. Like Mri, Trevino received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Scared True Crime. Stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.